Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of My English Brain. Now, in today's lesson, we are going to be talking about phrasal verbs that use down in the phrasal verb. Now, to start, let's look at some of these phrasal verbs that we're going to talk about today. Can you guess what they are? First, we have fall down. Then we have turn down. What about this one? Bring down. And this one? Let down. And the last one? Break down. Now, you can see that these all have one thing in common, and that is the particle down. However, they all use down in 5 different ways, and that is the topic of today's lesson. 5 ways to use down with phrasal verbs. Okay, a quick review. A phrasal verb is a verb and a particle. Now, a particle is basically just a preposition. For example, up, down, in, out, on, and off are all different types of particles that we use in a phrasal verb. And when we do this, it changes the verb completely sometimes. Now, today's focus is why and when we use down as the particle in phrasal verbs. Okay, the first reason we use down in phrasal verbs is the most obvious. It is when we want to indicate the direction of something going down. So, for example, fall down. He fell down twice. Again, when we talk about falling and we use down, it emphasizes the direction and emphasizes the idea that it hits the ground. The boy fell down. We can also use this with sit. Sit down. For example, it feels so good to just sit down at the end of a long day. We also use this with the verb lie. Lie down. For example, my cat loves lying down, so I can give him belly rubs. We also use down with put. Put down. Put down means to stop holding something. For example, she put down her phone on the table. Or take down. Take down means to force something to come down. For example, she took down her opponent in a really awesome way. Or we can use take down to just generally talk about removing something from an up position. If something is high, if something is up in the environment, we have to take it down. So for example, my cat loves to take down the Christmas lights. The second reason that we use down is to talk about reducing the intensity or reducing the strength of something. You can think about when the sun goes down, that it loses its intensity and it loses its strength. Now, we can see this idea of losing intensity when we use the phrasal verb turn down. Turn down. For example, can you turn down the music, please? It's kind of loud. Again, the idea is that the music is at a high level, and I want to bring down or turn down the intensity of the volume. Now, we can use turn down in many, many ways. For example, like we said, you can turn down the volume to reduce the volume. But you can also turn down the temperature to reduce the temperature. If it's too hot in your house or your apartment, you need to turn down the air conditioning and make it colder. But we can use turn down for almost any type of electronic product we have that has different levels of power. If it is a high level of power and I want to reduce it, I can say, can you turn down the fan? And it reduces the strength of the fan. Now, we can also see this idea of reducing the intensity or strength when we talk about our emotions. For example, calm down. Calm down means to become less excited or less angry. For example, I need to calm down for a second means I am too excited or I am too angry, and I want to reduce or calm down my emotion. We can also see this with the phrasal verb die down. Die down means to become less energetic or crazy. For example, the fans really died down when their team started losing. Again, the emotion and the craziness of the fans dies down when they start losing the game. We can also see this idea of losing intensity or reducing intensity when we say cut down. Cut down means to reduce the amount of something. If you cut down all of the trees, you're going to have less trees. So, it's sad they are cutting down so many trees in the Amazon. Now there are fewer or less of the trees when they cut the trees down. We use the same idea when we talk about reducing our own frequency or the own quantity of our own actions when we say cut down on. For example, I think I need to cut down on drinking so much coffee. I drink too much and I need to reduce the amount or frequency. So I say, I need to cut down on drinking coffee. Okay, time for a side lesson, guys. Now, today's side lesson is about how we use phrasal verbs. There's one rule you need to remember for phrasal verbs, and that rule is that after you use a phrasal verb, you need to always use the gerund form of the verb, or the verb ing, for the second verb. So, the rule is first phrasal verb, then if you use a verb, it's always the verb plus ing. Like in the example we just saw, I think I need to cut down on drinking coffee. Now, I use the phrasal verb cut down on, and the second verb is a gerund, drinking coffee. Always the phrasal verb, and then the second verb is the gerund, or the verb ing. So, question guys, what do you need to cut down on in your life? Write yours in the comment section below, and here's an example so that you can follow. Okay guys, the third reason we use down is to reduce the complexity of things or to reduce the options that you have. We can see this very clearly in the verb dumb down. Dumb down means to make something easier to understand. In the example, I like my professor because she can dumb down even the most complex ideas so anyone can understand. Again, the idea is that it's a very complex idea, a very difficult idea to understand, and we reduce the complexity when we dumb down the idea. We can also see this in the phrasal verb breakdown. Breakdown means to explain the individual parts. For example, in this video series, I'm breaking down how to think about phrasal verbs. So, the idea with breakdown is if we have many parts of something, it's very difficult to look at all of it at the same time. It's easier if we break it down into individual parts that are easier to understand. We also see this with the phrasal verb narrow down. Narrow down means to eliminate options. Now, if this is wide, then this is narrow. Wide and narrow. Wide and narrow. When a company hires someone, they have to narrow down the applicants to the most qualified person. The idea is that they start with many people. They have a wide variety of people that they can hire for the job. But they need to slowly eliminate options until they narrow down to the one person who is best for the job. So the idea of narrow down is to eliminate the bad options to find the single best option. We use this all the time when we talk about eliminating options from our own life. For example, I'm trying to narrow down where I want to take a vacation. I think it's between Costa Rica or Italy. The idea is that all of the countries, I have a wide selection. I need to narrow down to maybe 1 or 2 countries. Okay guys, the fourth reason that we use down is to talk about reducing the function, reducing the strength of something, or reducing the potential that something has. Now, we can see this very clearly in the verb wear down. Wear down means to wear something so much or to use something so much that you reduce or you impair the condition that it has. So, in the example, my brother completely wears down his shoes before he buys another pair. Again, the idea is that he uses the same shoes until they no longer are good shoes. They are falling apart. They are in a bad condition. He wears down his shoes. We can also see this with the phrasal verb break down. Break down means to stop working correctly. For example, my car is pretty old, so it breaks down a lot and I have to get it fixed. Again, this is the idea that a car is very complex, and in the individual parts, if one of them breaks, then the entire function of the car is not going to work. It also means reduce the function when we talk about a machine with many moving parts. Now, we can also see this idea of reducing strength or reducing potential when we use bring down. Bring down means to remove from power. We can use it in many different ways, like take down. If I take something down, I remove it from a high level. And bring down is very much the same. So for example, the government was brought down by protesters who were tired of having their rights restricted. This is the idea that the government is in a high position and the people bring it down. They remove it from power. Now, we can also see this idea of reducing function or reducing strength when we use this phrase, crack the whip. Crack the whip means to control something. So in the past, we had people like cowboys and ranchers who had to control their cow or their cattle. So they had to use whips to control the animals. So this is where we get the idea of cracking the whip to have control. For example, if your kids are out of control, you need to crack the whip so they know who's in charge. So we use this idea of crack and down to talk about reducing the strength or the function of a behavior, but specifically using that force. For example, the police are trying to crack down on illegal drugs entering the country. They're using their force to try and reduce the amount of illegal drugs. They crack down on illegal drugs. We use this all the time. For example, you can see teachers in the classroom that crack down on certain behaviors. For example, strict teachers often crack down on talking too much in class. Okay, the fifth reason why we use down in phrasal verbs is to reduce the emotional well-being or the happiness that a person has. Now, we can see this idea again in the phrasal verb break down. Break down also means to cry very, very hard. For example, he broke down when his soccer team lost the championship game. Why? Now, the idea here is that when we use break down for emotions, your emotions are breaking down so that you cannot have a normal function anymore. Now, we can also see this idea in the phrasal verb let down. Let down means to disappoint. For example, Jesse let his father down when he was arrested for drunk driving. So, the father's opinion of his son is very high, but when he is arrested for drunk driving, the opinion comes down. In the context of disappointing, the negative opinion, we say let down. He let down his father. We can also see this in the verb put down. Put down means to insult or to speak negatively about somebody. For example, my best friend's wife is really rude. She's always putting me down. Now this means she is saying mean things to me, bad things to me, and it makes me feel low. It makes me feel bad. So it brings my happiness down when someone puts me down. We can also see this with the phrasal verb talk down. Talk down is to speak as if you are superior to another person. For example, I'm not a fan of my coworker. He's always talking down to me even though we have the same job. Again, the idea is that he thinks that he is superior and higher than me. So he talks down to me and he makes me feel like I am inferior in the way that he talks. This is very similar to the verb look down on. To look down on is to judge someone in a negative way. For example, my mother-in-law looks down on me because my family isn't as rich as hers. Again, the idea is that she thinks she is superior and she looks down and she judges me for who I am. She looks down on me. She judges me in a negative way. Alright guys, so let's review. Remember, we can use down in 5 different ways. Number 1, to move in a down direction. Number 2, we can use it to talk about reducing the quantity or the intensity of something. Number 3, we can talk about reducing the complexity or the amount of options that we have. Number 4, we can talk about reducing the function or the strength that something has. Number 5, we can talk about reducing the emotional well-being of someone. So don't forget to write some examples in the comments below. Alright guys, nice job today. That's it for today's lesson. Now don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and wait and watch the next video in the series about phrasal verbs. Alright guys, take care, and don't forget to use your English brain.